Okay, so we've hit 3 o'clock. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for taking the time to join us here at TPMA for this afternoon's webinar. My name is Lindsay Blues. I'm a senior project consultant with TPMA's EDCR, or Economic Development and Community Resiliency team. Also with us today is my colleague, Jack Woods. He's my co-moderator for the event. Today, we're going to get some unique perspectives from 3 experts from 3 very different communities around the country regarding housing challenges and innovative solutions. So we'll be taking questions, so feel free to ask those as we go along, but I'll be holding the questions until about 30 minutes in. We'll also be recording this webinar and we'll post it to TPMA's YouTube page for you to view later. So now let me introduce our panelists for today. I'll let each of them tell you a little bit about themselves and their communities. But we have John Bond, who's the president of Switzerland County's Economic Development Corporation in Vevey, Indiana. Kim Downs, the city manager with the city of Hiawatha, Iowa. And Brian Brown, president and CEO of Greenville Housing Fund in Greenville, South Carolina. So John, why don't you start us off?
Well, thanks, Lindsay. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thanks everyone for joining us. I've been with the Economic Development Corporation in Switzerland County since 2005, and Switzerland County is my it's my hometown. I grew up there and lived in Indianapolis for about 10 years, and came back. It's a community of about just under 11,000 people, right in the southeast corner of Indiana. Commuting distance from Cincinnati and Louisville are our major metro commuting towns from there. And we'll get into this probably a little later, but the cities that are close but not too close as far as where folks like to locate near, we have about five metro areas that folks like to be near there. We have 2 incorporated towns there that make up about 20% of the population. So it is overwhelmingly rural in terms of the makeup of the community. In terms of what really makes the area unique, it's the historic homes in the area that are the draw for the region. We've actually had, and really just in the last few years, people that have chosen to be in, particularly in the 2 incorporated towns, that they specifically sought the area out for a particular home or a particular architectural style. And that I didn't believe that was happening in Southeast Indiana until I saw it in our own community. And in fact, our tourism director that we hired just last fall came to our community because he was looking for a particular type of house and found it right there in our community. As being a kind of a traditional economic developer, we didn't really look at housing issues historically in Switzerland County. And one of the unique perspectives that we had as a community, Switzerland County's history with economic development. I'm the first economic development director. I've been there for several years now. We looked at the more traditional things, industrial parks. We did a lot on workforce. We really kind of let housing go for a long time, and we missed out on a lot of the growth that we enjoyed as a community. Switzerland County was a gaming community. We got a casino early on, which made a lot of economic development possible for the community that otherwise would not have been. There was also a lot of industrial expansion that happened in the region around us that brought a lot of job opportunity to the area, but it didn't bring a lot of growth to the county because nobody had any place to live. So housing has really shifted as a top priority for us now because folks have finally connected the dots as to why the growth has not landed in our area and it's happening around us.
Thanks, John. Kim?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. As Lindsay said, I'm Kim Downs. I'm the city manager for the city of Hiawatha. I have been in city government for almost 21 years. I've been in Hiawatha for 16 in varying levels of responsibilities. I also am very much a part of our Hiawatha Economic Development Corporation as well. So I wear more than one hat for sure and enjoy every minute of it. It's always I always feel if I'm not learning anything new, then I'm stagnant. Just just as communities can be. Hiawatha is we are definitely a metro community. We are adjacent to Cedar Rapids and Marion, Iowa. We're about 2 hours away from Des Moines, if people are familiar with Des Moines, Iowa. We have our community, I think it has its uniqueness in the fact that our population is only 8,200, but during the day, we almost double in size. We have about 14,000 employees that come through our community. Believe it or not, only 9% of them live in Hiawatha. And I think that's part of, being part of a metro community as well. And 75% of those employees that come in live within 10 to 15 minutes outside of Hiawatha. And then the balance of that certainly is coming from different counties surrounding us in our region. Certainly, we're more of a rural area outside of the Cedar Rapids metro community. I think some of the other things, I think our housing, like I said, we're a young community. We're only 75 years old. So we're just at that point where we're having to redevelop ourselves. And we are doing this. We have a good balance of commercial and residential. In fact, if you look at our assessed valuations, our values are almost split in half from commercial to residential. So I think that makes it very unique in itself too, which would probably explain the fact of why we grow during the day. And that's an important caveat for us to be focusing on, because if we have 75% of those people that work here going out, living outside of our community, even though living close, why aren't they living in our community? And how do we establish that? Our community has we actually, did a housing study. And when I go back and I look at our percentage of growth over the last 10 years, we've grown 16%. So it's not like a huge number, but we're steady. I always say we're a steady community. We don't grow leaps and bounds, but we grow steady, and we prepare ourselves, our infrastructure, and put those incentives and those plans together. I think we are unique in a way that single family is consistently growing, but our multifamily is inactive. We have very low vacancies. Part of the reason why we have low vacancies right now is something called derecho. Did you guys hear about derecho in Iowa? That was like we learned 2 new words in 2020, COVID and derecho. So our vacancies are very low because there are certainly, people in surrounding communities that had damage, multifamily housing damage. So they've certainly went where they could and have certainly that fill in areas. But like I said, we have a very strong single family market for varying reasons. I think it's, again, being in a metro community, we are right in the middle of an interchange, and it's great, easy access, no matter whether you're going north, south, east, or west. We have a broad range of incomes and household profiles. In fact, the housing, I think, is somewhat unique in a fact that we have been, our housing is, the price points are interesting. The growth is anywhere from $250,000 and up to $1 million in assessed value. So I think that's very unique. Some of that certainly is because of we are technology, research development, medical, all of those things too. But we also have those nonprofit service-oriented businesses as well. Affordable housing, I think, one of the things I think that we talk about is not necessarily called for affordable housing as much as it is essential housing. And that is, I think, the shift that the mindset that we need to go into. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit later. Our housing study greatly provided our communities and those adjacent to us. When we look at our numbers of growth and traditionally how we think we're going to go, in 2024, we need about 387 units added. And this is multifamily and single family And in 2029, we need to add another 450 units to our community. And it's like, the chicken and the egg, what comes first, housing or business? And I think many of us could go back and forth with this, but I do think housing, as John just said, is a great part of bringing business into your community as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kim. All right, Brian, you're up.
Thank you. And so grateful to be here with this group. And I'm sure we're going to have a fun and enjoyable conversation about this topic. My name is Brian Brown, as Lindsay mentioned. I'm the CEO of the Greenville Housing Fund in Greenville, South Carolina. I've been here 2 years. I think in 9 days is my 2-year anniversary. And so what I can tell you about Greenville is it's a growing community. It's experiencing tremendous population growth, driven by the blessings of a vibrant economy and a growing economy. You might be familiar with Greenville from its old textile glory days. But this community spent a lot of time and energy reinventing itself and has a very strong advanced manufacturing sector. The Greenville County extends up to the border of North Carolina and the Blue Ridge Mountains. And because of our abundant natural resources and our climate and our geography, we have a very vibrant tourism economy here, and that means we have a large service industry. And so you've got advanced manufacturing, engineering, and all those things that go with that, and higher wages. And you've got service economy, which tends to be lower wages, and the population growth. And frankly, we're getting a lot of retirees moving here, and they bring their own source of income with them. And all of that is conspiring to dramatically push up housing costs in this community. And it's really creating an affordability crisis in our community, where we are threatened with people having to locate outside of the urban area of Greenville itself, which brings a lot of other challenges in terms of transit and congestion and traffic and huge infrastructure costs if you have sprawl and unchecked sprawl in a community. The other thing I always tell people that I think one of the challenges we have here in Greenville is people are finding out how special the community is, and the challenge we have is trying to keep what's special intact by arresting unchecked sprawl and really having more smart growth strategies that create mixed income opportunities for housing, and certainly provides attainable housing for everyone along the income spectrum, because we have, I liked what Kim said about essential housing, because we have a lot of essential workers, and we certainly want our essential workers to have access to attainable housing. And so Greenville is about 795 square miles. So it's a large county geographically. The city of Greenville is obviously its center and the largest municipality with about 70,000 residents. We have 5 additional municipalities in Greenville, and really interesting dynamics in terms of our housing supply and housing typology. The city of Greenville is actually a majority renter community now, not just in multifamily, but we have a large number of single family homes that are actually owned by others who rent them. And in the county, the reverse is true, where it's predominantly home ownership and less than a minority of rentership opportunities across Greenville County. And so I think our task at the Greenville Housing Fund is really to build sort of a coalition, which we have established the Greenville Affordable Housing Coalition, to raise the issues around housing affordability, its connection with economic development, its connection to keeping our competitive advantage when it comes to growing our economy, to ensure everyone has the opportunity to participate in our prosperity as a community. And I think importantly, the Greenville Housing Fund has at the core of its mission, access to housing opportunity across, for everyone in our community, and that includes a focus on access to racial minority, and particularly the African American community. We have a declining percentage of African American home ownership we really want to pay attention to in our community and really advance that kind of equity in access to housing as well. So I'll leave it there.
Well, Brian, John, and Kim, really appreciate that overview of each of your communities, kind of painting a picture about some of the differences. But then also, I think, just in listening to your descriptions, there was a few similarities that came out, and especially around housing challenges. Kim, again, kind of to echo what Brian said, really liked your comment about essential housing and kind of phrasing that differently than affordable housing. I know that's a big challenge probably across all three communities. But I know now that we've kind of given that overview about each of the communities, what do you think are some of the unique and innovative approaches that your community is taking towards housing? And Brian, we'll kick it back to you and start with you on that question.
Well, I think the fact that the community launched the Greenville Housing Fund just in 2018 is one of the more innovative approaches. I mean, the Greenville Housing Fund in and of itself is an innovative approach to supporting affordable and workforce housing in our community. We are here to deploy, scarce resources and to leverage them as much as possible to not only produce new affordable housing, but to preserve existing affordable housing, particularly naturally occurring affordable housing. And so I don't know that I mentioned the size of Greenville in terms of 70,000. We have 500,000 people in Greenville County, and then a million people in our MSA. And so, we are a large urban community. When you look at it that way, I think we have taken a deep dive in terms of data around housing affordability. And I think we are using that data and have used that data to come up with a community-wide strategic plan that covers the city of Greenville, but also the entire county. And then the Greenville Affordable Housing Coalition that we launched is really the group that is charged with implementing that plan. And we have a goal of preserving a minimum of 3,000 units over 10 years, and we are going to produce 10,000 units over 10 years. And I know that sounds like a lot, but I always tell people that's not a pie in the sky number. And that is evidenced by, we know we can get up to 9% low-income housing tax credit awards in this county. And that's just under 300 units if you think they're about 90 units each. And we can get a handful of 4% bond deals approved in this community every year. And those are larger. So, you're right around 500 to 600 units a year just in the tax credit. So in order to meet our goal of 1,000 units, we really and people laugh when I say this, we really only need another 400 units a year. And if we tap into our private sector partners and our for-profit partners, because we need everyone engaged and involved in meeting this challenge, I believe we can, frankly, easily achieve that goal. And if we do that, we will really enhance the quality of life in this community.
Thanks, Brian. John, I'll turn to you. Kind of let you talk about some of the innovative things that you're doing in Switzerland County.
Well, there's one thing that I think is unique to our community. There might be some communities that have something similar. We actually had a private foundation that years ago had focused a lot of its efforts on housing, and the benefactor that set it up actually had set up a tract of land that the foundation later created subdivisions on, and one of those was dedicated to starter homes, and they actually worked with state and federal resources to do counseling and get people into first-time homes. That program, as they worked through the land they had, was later pushed to the regional level, and they don't staff that anymore. But on a multifamily level, our best solution to date has really been to just put the data out there for folks that we think might be interested, and try to get as much information as we can in the hands of developers that might be interested. Most of our multifamily units that we have are dated. They've been there for a long time, and they were built with tax credits, or they were built with by people who come in and do a lot of them in different rural areas. We've had a little bit of interest in having a housing study in hand. Makes a big difference for those folks. They need to know what the demand is, and they need some current numbers as to what they need to have out there. And so that's why we like to have that in hand. And of course, we have a recent one now that we can show them. But we have local developers that do attempt to do those from time to time, and we always would prefer that, but it seems like as far as actually being able to utilize the resources, it tends to be the people that do that stuff more regularly, and they're wanting to see the data because they're not as familiar with your area.
And then Kim, I'll pitch this to you next. What are some of the innovative approaches that Hiawatha is taking to housing?
Well, certainly just having that perspective of the need for housing and the type and what are those needs specifically, and who are we marketing to? With this being a growing community next to metro, adjacent with Cedar Rapids and Marion as a metro community, we certainly have that, like I said, we have that broad spectrum, but who do we want to continue? Who's our market, essentially? So one of the things that we've taken a look at is we've looked at the fact that, one, we're a young community, growing community. We have the amenities in place. So we have the trails, we have transit, we have beautiful parks. We have spent, just on our main thoroughfare in Hiawatha, we have spent over $20 million in infrastructure improvements, from the road. Our community, I should have mentioned this earlier, our community is also unique in the fact that we never have had a downtown. We had old Highway 150 that came through, and lots of gas stations at one point in time, 50 years ago, gas station on every corner, because people would come from the north wanting to get south. And so before the interstate came through, we had old Highway 150. So we spent all of these past 10 years or so reconstructing from one end of our community to the other. Along with that, then we put beautification measures in place, trees, decorative lighting, because there was a time when Hiawatha, if homes were for sale, real estate companies, realtors would bring them in on the newer part of town. They wouldn't bring them into our community on our main road thoroughfare because it wasn't attractive. So how do we had to switch that mindset. And over the past 10, 15 years, that Hiawatha has done a great job. City council and the mayors have done a great job putting a vision in place. And so who do we want to attract to now? We certainly do want to attract to our younger population. We want to look at those individuals who are newly out of college. We want to look at the young couple who has a child and a half. I don't know how you have a half child, but statistics, that's what it shows, a child and a half. So how do we do that? Because they might start out downtown Cedar Rapids, the bigger metro community of 120,000 people, want to be active in the heart of everything. And then where do you go from there? So when you have that 1.5 child and have that affordability, or as I call essential housing, how do we market to those individuals? So certainly it really does come with your amenities. What type of entertainment do you have? Those types of things. So we have worked over the years to create all of those things. And with that, then, we certainly need to look at those income disparities and what does that look like? As I mentioned, our multifamily housing has been fairly inactive. The last multifamily housing that was built was back in the 80s. So as you can tell, over time, those deplete over time. One of the other challenge, I guess you could look at this as a challenge and an opportunity, and that is in the metro community, our market rates have a lower price point. So that too could work to our advantage in working with our developers. So by investing, I think that's the important part that every community needs to do. Is if you have an area that is ready for redevelopment and you're wanting to add multifamily, those types of things in place, you really got to take a look at investing in your own backyard. It's kind of like, as a couple and you have children, and my husband comes home and says, "Hey, you got to get your shoes out of the doorway." I always say to him, "You might want to remove your shoes first." So, and then you can say, "Hey, go get the shoes out of the doorway." It's the same concept here. We have to the city has to take care of its infrastructure, because that's where the value is going to be placed first. And then you bring in the developers and you pitch the concept, you pitch the ideas, but you have to invest in you first. So with that, then we did create an Urban Revite program that provides an abatement process for 10 years, up to 100% for multifamily units. And then it also provides single family 100% tax abatement up to the first $75,000 of its assessed value for a period of 5 years. And this is something we recently implemented, and we're starting to see that come full circle and see the benefits. We'll be seeing our first 2 projects this summer and fall. So we're excited about that. Very, very excited about that. And I think that those are some of those things that you kind of have to balance out, and like I said, who is your market, and really changing that perspective, that word affordable to essential housing, and what that means, because it's not just, the median income of $35,000 a year. It really, that could be a 2-person income, that could be 1-person income. It's a whole variety of things. And then just making sure with our rental properties that no matter keeping a challenge is being fair and equitable to everyone. And how do you do that? And that is just making sure that they're not limited. People aren't limited from their income resource. So whether that is Social Security, disability, or whatever it might be, that those are not the things that are deterring a developer or a property manager from turning someone away that is a quality individual, no matter how you look at whether they're working for a small company, nonprofit organization, or whether you're retired, whatever that might be.
Well, thank you, Kim, for leading me right into my next question.
You're welcome.
Which is, we're seeing how, everybody might not understand like the challenges that certain populations face regarding affordable housing, and just how are you tackling housing equity issues in your community?
Well, okay, we'll go right back to me. Okay. Yeah, definitely. That is certainly the thing that we need to take certainly take a look at. And that is, like I said, the survey, currently we have a survey going out right now to our rental properties. We also have put zoning requirements in place along, housing, rental licensures. We actually inspect annually. It took a little while for us to get that off the ground, but it really helps ensure that our facilities, buildings are safe and the environment is healthy. And it really puts that perspective in place and gives you the opportunity to have those communications with the property owners and connect the individuals together, from the renter to the property manager to the owner and the city. It really puts everybody on the same playing field. And I think that's a huge advantage for putting those housing codes in place, and then managing them from there, but from afar. We certainly, the goal isn't to bring more government into a place of business, as more as it is to be supportive.
That's a really good perspective. Thank you. I do want to remind all of our participants today, if you have questions, go ahead and drop those to us. We're going to hold them, but here in a few minutes, we'll start addressing questions. So don't hold those back and go ahead and put those in the chat as they come up. So Brian, we'll go to you next. Tell us about how you guys are tackling equity issues.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Through a variety of strategies, I appreciate the question. So we have a homeownership preservation program that really targets low-income homeowners, and we have special emphasis neighborhoods here that are majority minority neighborhoods. And so this is a grant program. We work with a couple of nonprofit partners, and this is to affect home repair and modification, particularly for those aging homeowners. And these are in neighborhoods that are rapidly gentrifying, because what's interesting about some of this work is if you look at historic patterns, you have areas that were a majority African-American neighborhood, and that over time, with white flight and then new urbanism and people rediscovering, how great it is to live downtown, has brought all this renewed attention on these near downtown neighborhoods. And so we want to preserve the opportunity for African-American homeowners to remain safely in their home, particularly as they age in place. And so our HOP, we call it the HOP program, the Homeowner Preservation Program, is one way we're doing it. The other way, and this is just going back to something Kim mentioned, working with the city of Greenville. The city of Greenville is putting in a new park. It's really going to be our, Greenville's version of Central Park. It's a $60 million new park that the city is investing to create. They're calling it Unity Park, and as the name suggests, it's located at the intersection of two, historically low-income and minority neighborhoods. And the city, over the years, acquired a lot of property there, and the city has now donated about 8 acres of land to the Greenville Housing Fund, so we can ensure, as we develop those sites into affordable and workforce housing opportunities, that the areas, around this new park will include attainable housing that is both, targeted to affordable and workforce households. So the land bank strategy, is just a really critical one, especially as you have, rapidly increasing cost of land. Another tool that we are using that's maybe more broadly targeting the provision of affordable housing, but this is a tool that's being used in downtown Greenville, which is just super expensive. And it's called the Multi-County Industrial Park, which is a special source revenue credit. So it's a tax abatement. And we had for the first time ever in downtown Greenville, we have mixed use Class A market rate developments occurring that are going to provide. One is providing 240 units of housing, commercial, retail type spaces, and the other one's 260 total rental units. Of those, we're going to have 106 of those units will be affordable at 60% area median income and 80% area median income in downtown. And to me, that is a huge accomplishment that will really help support, I think, our service industry, with our restaurant and hotel workers, retail workers downtown, because, unless you're wealthy, you cannot really live proximate to your job if you work downtown, and it's a huge challenge. And so using some of these tax abatement tools, tax exemption tools, I think is another key strategy to really bake in affordability. And these, when you use this abatement, for example, the affordability requirement runs with the term of the abatement. So, and another way of looking at this is the reduction in property tax is really tied to the reduction in rent. So the development team, who's got the same cost of developing the project, if they're reducing their revenue, this property tax reduction is a way to really plug that gap and make everyone whole on the development side. But we get what we want in terms of the provision of affordable housing units in a really important location. So those are a couple of the things we're doing, both homeowner and rental.
Yeah, I was just gonna. Do you mind if I add just a little bit, Brian? That's exactly. You're describing that very, very well. Thank you for breaking that down in pieces for everyone, because that's exactly what we're doing here in Hiawatha with our incentives. I think the other part of that in Iowa is that it's that public-private partnership. So it's the city, it's the state of Iowa, along with the developer. And the state of Iowa actually provides a couple different avenues through brownfield, grayfield dollars, and also workforce dollars. And so with that, then the state requires that the city participates in some way, shape, or form. And that's where our incentive program comes into play as well. And it really does bring that price point down. And it's the end user who actually gets to benefit from it. So very, very important. I appreciate you breaking that down.
Great, thank you. John, let's go to you next.
Sure. Well, and this is actually a very timely issue in our community on housing equity. We've been having an ongoing discussion about the condition of rental housing in our community that kind of spills over into equity, because it seems like it's an ongoing correction of folks that they'll be attacking the renters when they're attacking when they should be attacking the landlords for the condition of some of these facilities. And in a rural area, when you in an urban area, when you've got a lot of landlords, I guess it's more of a zone defense to try to manage these things. It becomes more of a man-to-man defense in a rural area, because you sit around City Hall saying it's that guy, and it's that guy, and it's just a couple of people that you wind up knowing where your problems are. And the interesting thing that we've discovered in our community is that the most valuable thing we can do is feed the conversation. We've had new people move in, and they're interested, they're engaged, and a lot of our locals are too, that have been here for a long time. They just needed some people who were new to the conversation to kind of give it a kickstart. And as you arm them with the information, and they say, well, this is how you do an ordinance, this is how you update one, and raising the quality of that housing. And because we've got a lot of older buildings, that's where a lot of our rental housing is. And you can go a long time without updating those facilities, as long as people are willing to pay it. And in our area, demand is such that you can rent a tent if you have one that there's, and you can really get away with just about anything if there's no one there to enforce it. And that's been a lot of what a lot of the conversation has been about, is how do we go about tightening some of this up and making it better for the renter, but also helping the appearance of our community.
Yeah, John, I was just going to add to that, or at the federal level, there's the Community Development Block Grant, if everybody's familiar with that or not.
Sure.
But that is something that we have taken advantage of for homeowner occupied in our older part of town. That is an awesome program, honestly. It really provides funding. And don't ask me why they didn't make it $25,000, but instead it's $24,999. But that is something that we have taken advantage of over the last 2 years, and we'll reapply for this. It takes about a year, a little over. You work with 6 homeowners. That's about the amount that you can accomplish, and it really meets the homeowner's needs. And I think that's the important part of it. Important piece of this is that, if for some reason they need ADA changes in their home, lead abatement, which is a whole nother bucket of money, which is very important and brings the safety and the value of the home up to par as well. New windows, heating, new furnace, steps, stairs, carpet, new shingles, whatever it is that they need to help make their home more efficient, and certainly adds value to them and saves dollars at the end of the day for them as well. Because if you're able to upgrade your efficiencies, you certainly then in return, those individuals see their gas bill being lower, their light bill being lower, those types of things. So I think those are important. There's also programs out there for rental housing as well. And hopefully I'll be able to take a look at that in the near future as well. But that is a huge benefit that helps with that aging household area as well.
Well, and I would add that some of our neighboring communities, I don't know a lot of the details about this. We haven't done it, but they were actually able to use the tax sale process to get some blighted properties back onto the. I don't know that those were used for rentals, but they used them for first-time home buyers. They got those properties rehabbed and back onto the market, and that's been a few years back. I think there are more entrepreneurs engaged in that tax sale process than there used to be since that's become a infomercial product now. But
yeah, let me just throw something out here though for consideration. I mean, obviously, I support everything that's been discussed in terms of equity and also the innovation that's occurring, in these different communities. I think the one challenge I just want to identify for the group and the audience is, when we talk about affordable housing, I can really use pretty much existing tools, market tools, traditional financing tools, existing programs, to really get down to about 50% AMI. But when we're talking below 50, and especially at the deepest levels of affordability, 30% AMI and below, chronically homeless, serving that population, we can build units, but you have to be able to afford to operate them. And without some kind of ongoing operating support in the form of rental assistance, it becomes very difficult. If we could develop 300 units of permanent supportive housing in Greenville, we would virtually end chronic homelessness here. The challenge we have is without that platform of supportive housing, our homeless shelters are sort of frozen, if you will, and because everything gets pushed down. And so folks in shelters have no place to exit. They don't have any attainable housing to exit into. And so our average length of stay in our homeless shelters here is approaching 18 months. We have people that wake up in a homeless shelter every morning and put on their clothes and go to a job. And I just think that that's a real, issue of dignity. And how do we support folks who work every day to actually have, to me, affordable housing is a place where lower wage jobs go home to sleep at night. And if you don't have that, and if you have people who are working every day, living in a homeless shelter, I just don't think it says something very good about your community. And it's certainly a challenge we have to address. And I just want to acknowledge that, because I know, affordability means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I just want to acknowledge that, that 50 to 80%, we can really hit that. But where we still need help is on that lower end, that 30% end of the incomes, of the area median income spectrum. And I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I think that's a really good point to call out, just because there is such a broad range of meaning when we use that term affordable housing. So I think that was important to cover. I do want to, maybe this kind of builds on that point in terms of demand for a variety of types of housing, shift over to another question here. But again, we're seeing this demand for housing of all types really increase throughout the country. But it doesn't necessarily seem like that demand is being satisfied, and all the types of housing that are needed to support our communities are being built. So with that in mind, how can communities drive that development that they need in their community? And also, how can they help get developers interested in having conversations with them? John, I'll go back to you for this one to start.
Sure. Well, I think the most important thing is that you've got to do the research and present it to them. I think that they've got to have confidence in your market, and if they're not familiar with your market, they know their business, they don't know your community. And a good example of that in my area is that the larger developers are most likely going to be coming from out of state. So they're dealing with a regulatory structure that they're not familiar with. And it's not that they never work in a different state. It's just a hassle for them. And you've got to get them past that. And you've got to work with them and show them, that's not something that's going to raise their costs. That's not something that's going to hurt their timeline. And there might be little issues that come up that take some hand holding. They're in the middle, just like any other economic development project. And even before that, you might have to get their initial interest and present your community as a place where they can make money. It's just like any other economic development project in those respects. And I said that was the most important thing, but I think this is the most important thing. You've got to get out of your own way with these things. And this is particularly for rural areas, I think we pride ourselves as being low regulation. That doesn't mean we're always easy to work with. You can do as much damage through neglect as you can by over-regulating in a lot of cases. If you can't get a hold of people, if you can't find the information you need. In the tourism industry, they do secret shopping of their retail and go in and see, just make sure everybody's nice when you walk up to the counter and all of that kind of stuff. It might not be a bad idea to secret shop your process and make sure that a developer just get on the Google one weekend and see what it's like, see how far you get if you want to put up a subdivision in your neighborhood or put up an apartment building. Because, if somebody's out there checking you out, they may be on to the next community before they wait till Monday morning and call your building inspector or whatever they've got to do because you don't have a good online presence or they can't find the information they need. It's worth looking at that stuff. And even the basic stuff, like can somebody get online and make a good determination as to why somebody would want to live in your community? I mean, what kind of footprint do you have, just for being searchable and what do you look like out there?
That's a really good point about having that web presence and making sure that everything is updated. Kim, what are your thoughts on what you can be doing to attract the attention and communicate with developers?
Yeah, I certainly agree with John, for sure. It is one thing that we really pride ourselves in having a one-stop shop here at City Hall. Everything you need, we really act as a partner, and we act as though that project, it doesn't matter whether it's on the commercial side or residential side, we act as though that project is our very own project as well. So we help guide them and help, we take a look at when they come in to visit with us. Again, even online on our website, it's easy access community development, economic development, all of that is all in one area, along with our comp plan. Just have everything right at their fingertips. So like John said, you don't want them having to spend, and they don't want to spend an hour. They've got 15 minutes. And so how do you get them to where they need to be? And so I think that one-stop shop is really important in having that friendly face and being very welcoming. And really, I think you also have to show your love for your community and the people that live in it. I think that's kind of evident. Developers are people as well. I mean, they look for those things. Okay, you say it's easy, but is it really easy? So I just bring everybody together. I bring community development together. I bring our city engineering together, public works, whoever it is that is going to be able to be there to answer the question, they're all at the table. And I think that's first and foremost, along with financing. How does the financing strategies work if there isn't? And then really sharing with them, there is advantages in building in Hiawatha because of the ease of doing business. And you only get one opportunity to show it. And so you have to make sure you do what you say you're going to do. Follow through with what you say you're going to do. We can talk about these programs, but if we don't have those in place, if we don't have those dollars ready and willing to move forward, it slows down the process. So the city of Hiawatha is never the one slowing down the process. And I tell all of our developers that if this goes slow, it's on you. It's on you, it's on your attorney, whoever it is, because we will keep it as simple as we can. The legalities that we have to go through. So it really is trying to make things simple. And there's no reason why it needs to be difficult. It really doesn't. They have a pro forma. I think that's the other thing we have to take a look at is look at our land. For us, we're looking at, where's the infill at? Where can we build single family housing? Where can we build multifamily housing? And then taking a look at that. What's it going to sell for? What's that pro forma look like? Because then are we able to incentivize it? Because we all have to be realistic. The developer has to be realistic. We as a community have to be realistic. So can we really get where they want to go? And if we can't, we just say, we can't do it. And here's why. So I think it's just, being honest up front, because we don't want to, I'm a farm girl, so we don't want to give the milk and the cow away. And so we really need to take a look at that and really think about what is it that we can do. And yet, the city has dollars to put in their coffers to continue to upgrade infrastructure and do the improvements that we need to do within our community. Again, that comes right back down to that public partner and private partnership.
Brian, is there anything you want to add?
Sure. I mean, I just go back to, I think, something that John and Kim both touched on. I think land use and zoning are just really critical issues. I think it's a challenge in every community. I'm not sure single family zoning has actually, I might be an outlier when I say this. I'm not sure it has served all of our communities as well as people think it has. I think there are, if you've heard of the book, The Color of Law, you will quickly discover that racial segregation and, practices of the past did not happen by accident. They were supported by public policies that I think we can all agree now were misguided and wrong. And I think and so as we try to overcome legacy of past practices, that some cases are still baked into some of our zoning and land use regulations, I think we have to have the courage to really take a look at that. I think in a growing community like Greenville, we have real tension between density and growth, particularly as maybe that growth is sort of coming right to the edge, or in some cases into existing neighborhoods. So we've, because we have a downtown, the city of Greenville sort of landlocked, if you can think of it that way. And so as downtown has grown, it is encroaching on what used to be historically existing single-family neighborhoods. And so I think there's a real tension there. But what I would argue is there's got to be a way that density and appropriate urban form can coexist with appropriate single-family typology that doesn't need to be on an acre lot, for example, especially in an urban environment. And so, I think, economic stratification in the United States is a real serious challenge historically. The most segregated place in America on Sunday morning is your local church. I mean, we've got some real, barriers to working on development and with developers in a way that makes sense. And so in Greenville, I am happy to say, having said what I just said, that in our community, we are looking at zoning reforms that actually incentivize affordable housing through a density bonus, for example, through parking reduction when you include affordable housing, through setbacks and other types of issues, so you can, increase your number of units, which frankly drives down the cost of living in the unit. Makes the economics of the transaction work more effectively. And again, I think, looking at land costs and, multifamily is one thing, single family is another thing, but I also think missing middle housing. So the typology of housing that is, neighborhood friendly, but is, slightly more dense, is certainly something that we are taking a hard look here in this community. And I think it's a typology that existed in the past. I mean, when I think about the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and boarding houses or, buildings that are 2 or 3 stories tall, maybe have 8 to 12 units in them. I think those have a place in a residential neighborhood. And, we have an aging population all over this country. Greenville's no different. And so to have a sort of what I would call a multi-generational, mixed income, vibrant and sustainable neighborhood should be something we are all striving to achieve. And I think the development community is certainly willing to embrace that and will be very, very good partners in it.
Thank you, Brian. So we do have a couple of questions from our audience. First of all, and they're both from Eric's, 2 different Erics asking 2 different questions. The first question is, are any of you battling an influx of short-term rentals affecting affordable housing availability?
Well, I can go far. I mean, yes. So in Greenville, we are having that. We are seeing that. And again, this is another. I think it's a zoning and regulatory challenge. And so, if you have either a new condominium building going up or a multifamily apartment building, how do you ensure it doesn't, in fact, become an unregulated hotel? So I think there are issues there. And of course, if you're a buyer of in the example of a condominium, but you're unaware that 30% of your fellow buyers are buying it to put it on short-term rental, that you didn't sign up for that. So I think, now I'm going to argue the opposite of what I just did about, maybe regulation's not our friend in every case. I think in this case, we need the right regulation to achieve, a balance and proportionality around these opportunities. But I will also say, in my experience, that these short-term rentals certainly do not support affordability. So I don't know if people have heard of this, but we're also looking at ADUs here in Greenville, so accessory dwelling units. So if you have a carriage house or a large garage that maybe has some square footage, above it that could be turned into a 1-bedroom or studio apartment type unit. That's another way to achieve density in an otherwise neighborhood, single family neighborhood. But when you do that and you put them on Airbnb and earn $2,000 a month, that is not supporting housing affordability. And so I think I'm very much in favor of ADU regulations that really lock in affordability. So you're promoting the use of the ADU typology, but you're doing it in a way that supports affordability, not going to the highest bidder on Airbnb. That's what I'll say.
What about you, John?
I would say absolutely. It's an issue. I would say the one saving grace for us is that demand is so strong right now that I think it even puts pressure on buying up property or buying up assets for that market. I think we've got a lot of industrial construction in our area that even the RV campgrounds are booming. There just happens to be a lot of people in the construction business that have gone that route for housing right now, and it's there's no rental property available. It's created a big bind for us, and it's we haven't seen a lot of short-term hotel type rentals happening just because there's nothing to be had really. And I think I saw a question about materials cost. I think that slowed people down also on developing anything new.
And I'll let Kim get to that as well. But just to build off of what you just said, the next question that we had was, how do you see the rising cost of lumber and building supplies affecting new infrastructure and updating current housing? And is it slowing down your projects, and who's consuming that increase in cost?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question, Eric. It certainly has its effects. I do think though that there's a balance in that, and I at least from our developers here who are moving forward with their building is also the lower interest rate that's in place right now. So it's kind of offsetting itself a little bit, but it is certainly delaying their projects, or they started planning for it. I have individuals that actually brought, they had 4 projects that they're planning to do in 2021, so they bought earlier, and so it's keeping projects moving forward, at least in our community.
Well, if you want me, let me just add, we've seen the escalating cost. We've had one development project that has, been killed by cost escalation. So it's not going forward. And then on several of our other projects, we're sort of stress testing them through, pro forma and saying, hey, if it's, instead of $140 a foot, if it's $160 a foot, does it work? How can it still work? So we're trying to model some stress testing as we move forward, just because we don't know where this is going to go or when and how it's going to end. I think the hope is that prices will ameliorate and settle maybe back down, and hopefully as we get beyond COVID and supply chains, start to improve and so on and so forth. But that remains to be seen, and we don't know.
We actually put some projects on hold. Well, I'd mentioned that I do some work with a private foundation, some housing projects we were going to do as a result of that, just because we hope that it levels off at some point. I know on the business side, my advice to businesses who are trying to hurry up before the prices of even steel go higher is check your entire supply chain, because everything you want to put in that building is going to be back ordered also. So don't pay a premium on your steel and then not be able to fill the building up. But yeah, it's a problem, to the point that I spent way more time than I should have researching 3D printed buildings, and could we get the equipment in and build a neighborhood real fast. We could unlock a lot of wealth in our community if everybody could unload their home equity right now and sell their houses. The value of homes has gone up, exponentially in our area just in the last few months. But everyone would be homeless. There's nothing to be had if they sold their house. So we've got a real issue.
We are, and as a result of these currently, escalated material costs, we are using the opportunity to look at some alternate material in some cases, and we are also, Greenville Housing Fund is looking to demonstrate a modular construction opportunity here in the community, just because by modular, I don't mean mobile, I mean modular, it's constructed in a controlled environment, high quality, and then, brought to the site already assembled and then delivered to the site, assembled and manufactured. If we can save 30% per foot, it's or more, I mean, it's certainly something worth looking into. And I think modular construction is something that is much more prevalent in other countries and economies. And so I think it's something, we at least want to use this opportunity to explore further. So that's another thing we are doing.
Well, and Brian, I would follow up. We've talked to those folks at length. Also, there are actually quite a few of those companies in Indiana, and they're more efficient with their materials. So we thought we might have a fighting chance with them as far as in escalating material costs. And they work through surcharges in a lot of cases rather than just quoting based on wholesale lumber. We're still waiting to hear back on what they can do in this environment. But yeah, that's a possibility.
Okay, and last question from our audience is actually directed at Brian. Are your affordable housing program incentives actually attracting developers, and are developers proactively taking advantage of those incentives?
Great question. I would say yes, they are, but I would also say we're in the proving stage of these incentives because they're brand new. And so I don't want to overstate it. I think what I will say is I think the intentionality is there to promote it. And so we do have some selected development partners where we're working to use these incentives. And I'm happy with the response we've received from the developer community. And I'm also happy that our local government, and particularly the city of Greenville, has put out this zoning modification form-based code in a particular geography, so we can test how these incentives work. And so we're sort of in that proving stage right now, but I am optimistic that it will help us increase the supply of affordable and workforce housing, and also I think help us deliver a high quality mixed income opportunity in an area that really needs it.
Thank you. And I lied, there's one more question that just came in from our audience, and I really want to ask it. So we can see more urban communities exploring some of these more innovative approaches and solutions to their housing challenges. Rural communities also have similar housing challenges, but tend to be more conservative and risk averse to embracing progressive solutions. How would you communicate or advocate for these kinds of solutions to more rural audiences?
Whoops. I'll just jump in on that first and let my colleagues add. Greenville County has large volume that's rural. And we actually have huge areas of our county that are actually unzoned to this day, which I find hard to believe, but that's just the reality. And so, I think we have some of those rural challenges, and we have some local conservative policymakers, frankly. And so I think, it's a great question, but I also think that, we've had the recent opportunity to engage with some of our more conservative policymakers locally around housing affordability and what it really means. And one of the things I will say is I think the proof is in the pudding sometimes, in terms of if you can point out housing that's affordable, you're not doing it right. And it doesn't help us if that's the case. And so we've recently purchased a disinvested apartment community in one of our local council members' district. And I had lunch with him to tell him, hey, we just bought this property. And he knew exactly where it was. He's like, that's what I don't like about affordable housing. And I said, well, we're going to invest $1 million fixing it up. And I'm going to have you over, and we're going to, so the before, let's get to the after for these improvements. And I think that's one way we're really going to, and we've already, in some ways, won him over just with the efforts that we're undertaking in terms of improving some of this disinvested housing stock in his district. And also acknowledging that, we want affordable housing that's not concentrated in specific areas. And I think even in rural areas, I think it's easier when something is affordable if it's isolated. I think it can, promote stigma, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think we have to be really careful about overcoming that stigma. And I also think that the right policies are the right policies, whether they're rural or urban. Now, obviously, form and type are different in some cases, but I also think land values and land costs are very different in those different environments. And so I think, this is certainly not a one size fits all by any means. And my experience is every development that I've ever been a part of is always different. They're always very, very different and unique. And so anyway, I'll let my colleagues help me out on this.
Yeah, I think, what to add to what Brian just said, I think the other thing too is, as a city, you have to take a look at, if it isn't for that, what would there be then? So honestly, we all need housing. As you heard that today, every community in the United States of America needs housing. That is a huge need. And again, getting past that word affordable housing, that connotation to it, and really switching it to essential housing. What does that mean? I mean, if you just take a look at what your median income is in your communities, and then what is that percentage? Take a look at that, because if they fall into that affordable housing percentage, you know these individuals, especially in a rural community, the people who live in your community and what they bring to the table. And so I think you have to take a look at that. But you definitely need to take a look at, if you do nothing with that land, then what will you do, and when will that happen? The longer you sit on land, the longer it really just sits there, and it's not bringing anything, any property tax or however you're regulated. It doesn't bring anything to the table. So I think you do have to take a look at that. There's certainly pros and cons to everything, but I think you're going to find that the pros are going to outweigh the cons.
Well, I think that's a great question, I guess, as far as coming from the perspective of a rural area. I do think running head on into risk aversion is the number one thing you confront all the time. And I have to put a lot of thought into how I'm going to confront Typically, as with a lot of issues, you'll run into folks. Well, for example, when our housing study, when we were first walking the draft around to kind of let people know that we were doing this housing study, one of the folks that was involved in a lot of zoning issues that I just wanted to run this by let me know pretty clearly that they were going to be opposed to anything that resulted in more rental housing in the area, because look how dumpy all the rental housing was. And it's there in a lot of cases they're drowning in the results of the status quo. So we should keep out any change. That doesn't always make sense, the thought process. But I think, as an example, what I would do is probably solicit the help of some of my employers in the area who desperately need the workforce and cannot commute it in from any farther away. And I've got one manufacturer that point blank told me that we decide what we're going to make every morning based on who shows up. And it's we need these people to be closer, and we need more selection from who we can bring in. And that's it's as much a housing issue as it is anything else. And those aren't problems any other rural community isn't dealing with.
I think that's a great point, John. That's just a really critical point, I think, especially for rural communities.
We did have one follow-up to that question, and I think it's been somewhat addressed, but I'll pitch it back out there to the group just if there's any final thoughts. But it is, how do you combat Nimbyism from communities that are experiencing that kind of growth, I believe, and development that is encroaching on areas that used to be more residential or rural? So more denser development encroaching on more rural areas, because that local pushback can so often kill momentum and energy for housing projects. So how do you combat the Nimbyism?
Good question, but a tough question. I was going to try to say something funny, but I'm not going to. So we're in a development project right now where this has been an issue, and it's really around. I think everyone, it's like, how do you manage competing interests? And that's really what Nimbyism, I think, in many ways comes down. And when you get beyond, hey, some people might say this is going to promote gentrification and drive up costs more than we want. Some people might say we don't want, low income, affordable housing in our community. I mean, it could be the gamut in terms of what the objections might be. But I also think that, in our case, I mean, we're using data on this topic to combat Nimbyism. Depending on what you're developing, I've used good neighbor agreements in the past where, if we were doing a supportive housing development in a particular area and we had an adjoining, neighborhood association that was raising some objections to doing that, you can enter into good neighbor agreements that sort of contractually lay out what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and how you're going to be a good neighbor and how you're going to maintain the property and the services you're going to provide and so on and so forth. So I think there are very concrete strategies that can be deployed to combat Nimbyism. And I think Kim mentioned this earlier. One of it is just education and educating the community about what this all really means and who is in our community. And somebody was just reminding me on the rural housing conversation, even in our community, I mean, I've had some local policymakers, but they have aging parents who are on a fixed income and they want to be independent. They do not want to go into some kind of assisted living, but they're also, because they're on a fixed income, affordable senior housing really meets their needs. And these are folks where that might be a new experience for them. And so if you are managing an aging relative and they want to be independent, you're now going into affordable. I mean, affordable senior housing is something you personally might use and benefit from, or for your relative, your parent, grandparent, whatever. And I've had that experience here locally, and it really changes people's minds when they have that personal experience, and you never know where it's going to come from. And so, but it's also about connecting those dots and doing that education.
I guess, Brian, one other follow-up I'll ask you on this, and it kind of goes to, I think, one last question that we just got in here. Can you maybe speak a little bit more on how you're structuring those educational opportunities in the community?
Oh, sure. We've, we have a coalition. We've done community forums. We've had 400 people. I mean, before COVID, we had 400 people actually show up to, several community forums. We did one on the intersection of health and housing, and how good, attainable, high quality, affordable housing actually helps achieve social determinants of health in a community, and the intersectionality of that. And we've, there have been others that we've done on workforce development and housing. I think John was just mentioning an example of that around business owners who, and there are folks who have either they're business consultants or they've worked with manufacturers or so on and so forth about either expanding a company or bringing a new manufacturer in. But those business owners and leaders have identified the lack of workforce housing as a barrier to growing their business or locating their business in our community. So we have those examples. And when people hear that, I mean, it really opens up their thinking. We also did a community forum on transit and housing, and really looking at transit-oriented development, and really how do you look at nodes and corridors in your community, and how do you get people from housing to either educational opportunities, job opportunities, amenities, and so on. And, looking at access to food. I mean, that's really about, can be about transit and social determinants of health. But all of that, and having those, what I would call broader community conversations that are done in an organized way with good facilitation and well-informed speakers really goes a long way to doing that community engagement, community education that I think we all benefit from when we have a more informed citizenry on this topic.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Lindsay, I'll just add one more thing to that. I think the other thing too is you certainly have to start with your mayors and councils, those people that are going to influence that outlook as well. And so one of the things that we did is we took a tour of an area that was building what they called smart series housing. So it was this provided a smaller footprint, square footage of homes. So it could be like 900 square feet to 1,800 square feet. And really, and the backyards are smaller. It's kind of like being in Arizona, I guess, is how I looked at it. Very small front yards, very small backyards, takes you maybe 15 minutes to mow it. Entry levels, variety of housing styles. And really it, when you think, and that was called affordable housing, smart series housing, smaller footprint, sidewalk on one side of the street, roll curb, those types of things, so that you can put more house on the land. And that was huge. That was huge for them. But interesting enough, very much like what John and Brian are saying, it is that the people who were actually living in these were young professionals, newly married, to those retiring, empty nesters, those types of things. So I think there's advantages of hopping in a van, carpooling, whatever it is you need to do, and actually go look at what affordable essential housing looks like. Because we all have this these preceptors and what we think it is based on whatever our experiences are. But in today's world, it is not the same. And I think that's the part of education, but actually let them see what it really looks like.
I think that's a great segue into final thoughts. Thank you so much, Kim. So we only have a couple of minutes left. I want to make sure that I give each of you a couple of minutes, or actually just like a minute, to just wrap up with any final thoughts you have. Let's start with John.
Well, I think we've covered it here, but I guess my message for the day would be housing is economic development. I can remember the days when we thought workforce development was a social program, and we all just wanted to do cool things like incentives and building roads and sewers and things, and we all let that go for way too long too, and we need to be focusing on housing. This is going to drive jobs and growth. And thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you. Brian?
Oh, just thank you for having me. Really enjoyed being on the panel with John and Kim and Lindsay and Jack. Thank you so much. I think this topic, it does have complexity to it because of the diversity of need, the diversity of typology, the diversity of, urban versus rural. And so, I just want to acknowledge that it is a complex topic, and every community is, I've learned from my own experience, every community is so uniquely different. There are different resources, there are different institutional relationships. There are different relationships amongst local, state, federal government representatives. And so really figuring out where those relationships are and how to advance not only the conversation, but I think to advance the goal of providing more affordable and workforce housing is just something that, is uniquely situated to whatever community you're in. And so I just encourage you all to, be open-minded and look at what your own sort of unique circumstances are and build on your strengths.
Yeah, I think what I would add to John and Brian's comments is persistence. You have to be persistent. And with that, in time will come, be persistent and look for those opportunities. The city of Hiawatha is getting to take advantage of that. And with all of what we've been talking about today, and then what we've been working on over the last 10, 15 years, we're actually getting to see a $9 million project that has the multifamily piece that we need to it. It's a mixed use with some retail commercial on the bottom. We have another developer that's working on a $30 million project over a 5-year period that too will have multifamily mixed use in it, and helping us create that downtown that I was talking about earlier. If you have a vision and you're persistent and just keep looking for those opportunities that will open that door, and keep having those conversations, keep them, the coalitions that Brian talked about, getting the right people in the right place along with those developers, and just selling your community and the value that the people who live in it have in what they add to your communities. I think persistence and opportunity, look for those. Those are going to be important for your future.
Well, thank you, Kim, John, and Brian. We really appreciate your time today speaking to the group. All your insights were really informative. And I think it was a great conversation as well. I do want to mention that this recording will be posted to YouTube. So if anybody wants to go back and kind of pick back up on a point that was said, or share with anyone else, that'll be available on TPMA's YouTube page. And if there are any other questions that maybe came up for anybody watching that they didn't get to ask but want to address, feel free to reach out to us via email, TPMA, and we can ask those questions to our panelists. But again, thank you to our panelists again for their time, and everybody else, the participants who watched. And with that, I think we'll close this webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.